Just then, with small creature perched on his shoulder, Cheon-du appeared right in front of little Nari, stopping the fire with his bare hands. Behind him, frightened little Nari wiped away her tears. Cheon-du thought to himself that all he had wanted was to finish building the cabinet and eat in peace. But now he was forced into this fight. The small creature's eyes glowed with determination as it used its telekinesis, and told Cheon-du it would reveal the location of the trees later. For now, saving the child was the top priority. Cheon-du's eyes glowed with determination, ready to act. Kim Nari sat trembling on the ground, clutching her head as she muttered for the fire to go away. Seeing her, Cheon-du realized she is terrified of the flames, and clearly not in a stable state of mind. He calmly said to the small creature that they should put out the fire first. The small creature on his shoulder agreed, angry at the thought of someone bullying a child, calling it the act of a scumbag. Seeing Cheon-du, the man cloaked in flames glared fiercely and demanded, "You're clearly not some caveman. Whose side are you on?" He narrowed his eyes and added, "You're after the mechanical creature too, aren't you? Then listen carefully. I'll only say this once. Leave while you still can." Both Cheon-du and that fire guy stood across from each other, tension filling the air. One was wreathed in flames, while the other remained calm and steady. Breaking the silence, the Cheon-du spoke firmly, "You talk too much." This made the fire guy, engulfed in flames, roared in fury. He shouted that his opponent was getting cocky, his rage spilling out with the fire around him. Then, with gritted teeth, he growled not to ruin the moment. Fire guy, consumed by fury and flames, shouted loudly for his opponent to get lost. With fire blazing around him, he slammed his hands into the ground, sending out a powerful fiery attack. Seeing that Cheon-du stood firm with a serious expression, his eyes sharp with focus, he raised his hand and pointed forward, a bright blue light shining from his fingers. Cheon-du pointed forward, releasing a powerful burst of blue energy that clashed against that fire guy's fiery attack. Cheon-du's attack created a massive explosion of light and force as it hit the mountain behind the fire guy. An explosion erupted with a blinding light, shocking the fire guy. His eyes widened in disbelief as he muttered in confusion, "What the?" The fire guy's face twisted in shock as debris rained down around him. His eyes widened, and sweat ran down his face as he gasped in disbelief, too stunned to speak. Only a cry of alarm escaped him. As the dust and debris settled inside the massive crater, Cheon-du asked little Nari gently if she was okay. Little Nari replied she was fine now. She wiped her tears, her voice soft with relief. She said that uncle had put out the fire, feeling safer now. Looking at Kim Nari, Cheon-du spoke calmly. He told her that whenever she felt scared, she should face it directly and defeat the fear itself. Meanwhile, the fire guy lay battered and motionless on the ground. Cheon-du grabbed the fire guy by the hair and said firmly that when they woke up, they should knock it off, saying that he swung up that fire guy into the air. But just as he held the enemy up by their hair, paused, his eyes widening in surprise as he realized something was off. Cheon-du looked back and saw that the fire guy lay on the ground and his head now bald. Cheon-du looked at him in confusion and exclaimed, "What the heck is this?" Looking at the fire guy's bald head, Cheon-du wondered if he had always been bald. The small creature sitting on little Nari's head was very annoyed, and called the fire guy a little brat. Even little Nari looked at him with wide eyes, clearly confused, as the sunlight reflected off the smooth surface of a shiny head, revealing it to be completely bald. Little Nari quietly muttered the word, "bald," in surprise. She burst into laughter, holding her stomach and tearing up from how hard she was laughing. She found the bald head hilarious, and shouted that being bald was funny. Little Nari laughed loudly, calling the fire guy, "Baldy." She said she wasn't scared of him anymore. Hearing this, the Cheon-du looked at her in silence. He was confused because while he was fighting that fire guy, he realized that the opponent was not strong enough to defeat little Nari. Just then the small eyes glowed brightly as it prepared to use its power. It explained that this would make everything clear. The ability, called mental resonance, allowed him to look into another person's memories. Suddenly Cheon-du's eyes also glowed with a golden light as the power flowed through him. Little creature's ability not only allowed it to look into memories, but also to share those memories with others. In little Nari's memories, Cheon-du saw a dark room. There a man in a lab coat stood before a glowing screen, his posture tense as he leaned on the table. A low, unsettling laugh escaped him, echoing through the room. The man's glasses glowed brightly, hiding his eyes as he grinned with a twisted smile. His expression was filled with a sinister excitement. A small slime creature trembled nervously, its round eyes showing fear as it shifted on the floor. It was little Nari when she was just made. Watching her reaction, The man remarked that it seemed to be dodging him now, and noted that the slime had finally started to develop a sense of self. The man stretched out his hand, blue flames burning around his fingers. His voice was cold and commanding as he called out to the slime, telling it to come closer. The man spoke in a cold, dismissive tone, saying there was nothing to fear. To him, this was just another durability test, nothing more. A loud scream echoed as that man burned Miss Little Nari with fire. Seeing all that Cheon-do finally understood everything, he gently placed his hand on Little Nari's head and praised her, saying she did well. Little Nari looked up at him in confusion, not fully understanding. Cheon-do thought to himself that trauma doesn't disappear so easily, but perhaps this was the first step toward healing. Then looking at that bald guy, Cheon-do wondered what they should do about him. Little creature tapped the bald guy's head, checking if he's awake. Suddenly, Little Nari got an idea. Little Nari stood proudly with her hands on her hips. Stars sparkled around her as she announced with confidence that she had a great idea. Then few minutes later, that bald man was tied by ropes, was held down a waterfall. Water surged powerfully, making his coat and boots were soaked. Seeing him, Little Nari shouted excitedly that if he got wet, his fire would go out. And now the bald uncle wasn't scary anymore. The bald man stood there, soaked and stunned, water dripping from his face. He admitted with frustration that this wasn't the reason he came to the demon world. When Little Nari saw that bald man had awakened, she angrily pointed at the bald under the waterfall and called him a bad bald uncle. The soaked man clenched his fists in frustration, thinking to himself in annoyance. Meanwhile, Cheon-do nearby reminded Little Nari not to judge people based only on their looks. Little Nari smirked mischievously, while Cheon-do calmly held a pot with a gentle smile. Watching her reaction, he thought to himself that maybe she would recover faster than he had expected. Then Cheon-do crouched by the river, filling a pot with water. The little creature flew nearby, watching him closely and asking what he was doing. Calmly, Cheon-do replied that he was getting water to make ramen. Hearing that, Kim Nari shouted with excitement, declaring that Uncle's fish ramen was the best. Cheon-do glanced at her with a faint smile and asked in disbelief, "Really?" Cheon-do asked if the coconut tribe also ate fish ramen. Flustered, Kim Nari quickly raised her fists and shouted that they did, insisting that the coconut tribe loved ramen. Meanwhile, water splashed on that bald guy. Water dripped down the man's face as he narrowed his eyes. From his sharp gaze, he judged that Cheon-do was at least an A+ class hunter. He thought to himself that Cheon-do might be even stronger, just hiding his true ability. Meanwhile, Kim Nari splashed into the water with her legs kicking, shouting that she would catch the fish. Beside her, Cheon-do calmly held a pot, watching her. Looking at him, the bald man thought to himself that Cheon-do was probably a reclusive hunter living off the grid. Meanwhile, Cheon-do looked at the water and muttered that he would need more if he was cooking for 3. Seeing them preparing to make ramen, frustrated, bald guy thought that catching someone and then sitting down to eat ramen, even for the demon world, this situation felt completely wrong and messed up. Suddenly, Little Nari burst out of the water with a fierce expression, holding up 2 large, sharp-toothed fish in her hands, while another clung to her head. With excitement, she shouted proudly to her uncle that she had caught a fish. Cheon-do told Little Nari to give him just 1 fish, and release the rest back into the water. Seeing that fish, that bald guy got shocked. Little Nari quickly agreed, and urged him to hurry so she could toss it in. The bald man stared nervously at the strange fish, sweat running down his face. He wondered what these creatures were, and worried that using one would only make the broth smell terrible. Little Nari dropped the strange fish into the pot filled with water, causing it to splash. Watching this, the bald man grew more uneasy, wondering why Cheon-do was using so much water in the first place. Frustrated, the bald man wondered if they even knew how ramen was supposed to be made. Meanwhile, Little Nari happily ran forward with small creature sitting on her head, cheering that it was ramen time and that she was excited. Cheon-do calmly followed behind, holding the pot of water. Bald man suddenly shouted for them to wait. Kim Nari stopped in her tracks. Cheon-do also stopped behind, looking slightly confused. The bald man struggled in the rushing water, looking desperate. He asked if they could finally let him down. With frustration in his voice, he shouted that he would cook the meal himself. And then few minutes later, the bald man stood at a wooden table under a spotlight, placing a packet of ramen on it. To some, ramen was just food. But as he carefully opened the packet with trembling hands, he thought differently. For him, at that moment, it wasn't just ramen, it was life or death. Cheon-do and Little Nari, along with the small creature, sat nearby with dark expressions, silently watching, their red eyes glowing with hunger and anticipation. The bald man reminded himself, ramen must be made with sincerity. He decided to stick to the basics, since he didn't know anything fancy anyway. The bald man stood in front of a pot, focused and serious. He trusted his instincts to decide the amount of water, since he was cooking 3 servings. He added the noodles and soup base into the boiling water, knowing it had to cook for exactly 4 minutes and 30 seconds. With his heartbeat steady at 60 per minute, he decided to count 270 beats to track the perfect time. As the seconds passed, he concentrated deeply, his heartbeats guiding him. Finally, when the time was right, he lifted the noodles high into the air, shouting his technique. Air shower. It was a crucial step. Exposing noodles to air, like that, adds that perfect chewy texture in noodles. Sweating but determined, the bald man thought how kimchi would have made the dish complete, but reminded himself that this was the demon world. Still, he smiled, knowing he gave it his best. The ramen was finished, and he had no regrets. The pot of noodles gleamed, labeled as Namgi's sincerity. Ramen. It had 90 flavor scored, 24 carbs, 18 protein, 20 calcium, and 20 fat. The bald man carefully served the ramen, offering it to the others, and asking them to give it a try. Little Nari looked surprised, noting that it felt different from the uncle's ramen. Cheon-do agreed, and prepared to taste it. Cheon-do took a bite, saying he would see how it tasted. Soon, the 3 of them, including the small creature, sat at the table together, eating the ramen. As they tasted it, their eyes widened in shock. Cheon-do, the girl, and the small creature all realized something at the same time. This taste was special. They were overwhelmed, as if transported to another world. Well, basically they were in another world, but it felt completely different world. They thought to themselves that this was not just food. This was the true taste of sincerity. Little Nari's face lit up with joy as she exclaimed how delicious it was. The small creature chirped, asking if humans ate such food all the time. Cheon-do smiled, admitting even he was impressed, before suggesting they eat first. After the meal, the small creature lay on the table, completely full and exhausted, letting out a satisfied sound. Cheon-do also placed his chopsticks on the table after eating. The bald man laughed nervously and asked if the food suited their taste. Cheon-do, Little Nari, and the small creature had already finished eating, their bowls completely empty. Cheon-do stayed quiet for a moment. Then, with a serious look, he told the man to name his price. The bald man was shocked and confused. Cheon-do explained that the meal was far too good to eat for free. He insisted that the bald man ask for something in return, and if it was within his ability, he would grant it. Surprised, the bald man asked if he really meant it. When Cheon-do confirmed, the bald man dropped to the ground, bowing deeply, and shouted for him to teach him. The man revealed his name, Hunter Namgi, and begged to be trained. He declared that he wanted to become strong like Cheon-do. Cheon-do looked confused, asking why he was being called that, and what Nam meant by teach. Namgi, still bowing, praised Cheon-do as the strongest hunter he had ever met. He assumed Cheon-do must be here for a long-term mission, judging by his house. Desperate, Namgi tried to convince him further. He claimed he could cook many other dishes and even had certifications, though he admitted he didn't really. He shouted that his father owned a fried chicken shop, and that he could make amazing fried chicken. That was true. Pushing harder, Namgi pointed out how troublesome it must be to pass through the gate constantly for supplies and clothes. He offered to be Cheon-do's runner, handling errands for him. Finally, he promised to even pay any price Cheon-do wanted in exchange for lessons. The bald man knelt down before Cheon-do, his voice filled with desperation. He begged for the chance to train under him, declaring his dream of reaching A-class. Cheon-do, however, remained calm, and asked only one question. He wanted to know the bald man's true reason for attacking Little Nari. Was it really just for the bounty? The man stammered, confused, asking if Cheon-do meant the robot. Before he could finish, Cheon-do quickly whispered that they should stick with the Coconut Tribe story and play along. Realizing his mistake, the man nervously agreed. Lowering his head, tears forming in his eyes, he admitted that it was personal and difficult to explain. But soon his voice grew louder with emotion, as he cried out that he didn't care about rewards or Little Nari at all. What mattered to him was passing the hunter rank test, nothing else. Cheon-do studied him for a moment before giving a simple command. He told the man to stand. Startled, the man asked why, but Cheon-do stood up, his body glowing faintly with energy. He explained that after enjoying a good meal, sparring was the least he could offer in return. The bald man's face lit up with gratitude as he bowed deeply. He thanked Cheon-do with all his heart. Just then, The little Nari suddenly spoke up. She slammed her small hands on the table and demanded to spar instead. Cheon-do turned to her and asked if she was certain. With fiery determination in her eyes, she recalled the lesson he had once given her. When you're afraid, knock it out. Holding on to those words, she declared that she wanted to face the challenge herself. Hearing that, the bald man chuckled nervously, trying to lighten the mood. He reminded little Nari that while Cheon-do was certainly strong, he himself wasn't exactly weak either. But little Nari's piercing gaze and unwavering silence made it clear she wasn't going to back down. Cheon-do looked at Nam Gi-seok and asked if he could break the giant black stone in front of them. Nam Gi-seok froze in shock and quickly explained that the stone was obsidianite, a material said to be many times harder than diamonds. He nervously laughed, saying it was impossible to break unless one was at least an A-class hunter. But before he could finish his words, the stone suddenly shattered with a loud explosion, leaving him wide-eyed and trembling in disbelief. Nam Gi-seok froze, his face pale with shock as sweat trickled down his cheek. As he tried to process what just happened, Kim Nari stood up, her small body glowing with energy. She was the one who used her power to break that obsidian. With a fierce expression, she pointed her hand at him and declared with confidence,